Hi, my name is Marcus Huyskens, and I want to take a moment to welcome you to the official RePitch 2 overview video. Now, for anybody who's coming from RePitch Standard or RePitch Elements version 1, a lot of what I'm talking about here is going to feel familiar, but I encourage you to stick around because we're going to be kind of peeling back the layers on some of the new features and updates that we have within RePitch version 2. Now, the way that I want to approach this video is to have a general overview that kind of covers everything that you need to know to get yourself familiarized with this plugin. And we're definitely going to have different sections within the chapters, as opposed to setting info cards for every different feature and having to jump between different videos. I want this to kind of be something that can get everybody hit the ground running when working with RePitch 2. So for today's video, I'm going to be working in Studio One Pro, which is an ARA compatible DAW, but it's worth mentioning that we've got ARA support for a lot of the main DAWs. As of the time that I'm doing this video, we just got ARA support with Luna. So there's lots of benefits of using this workflow. So anything that I'm talking about should apply right across the board for those different DAWs. Okay, that being said, let's dive in. Now, the very first thing I want to do here is a GUI overview. And what we're going to do is we're going to peel back the features and peel back the layers on a case-by-case basis. So I have ingested a vocal region into RePitch Standard, and this is kind of exactly how it is in terms of being pulled up. Let's take a look at the GUI. So in the ARA versions, we have basic navigation. We can click anywhere from within the top of the timeline ruler, and this can also be followed. Let's make sure that we're in the proper setting over here, which is going to be bars, and let's go with a 16th note. So these are matching in terms of the actual BPM. We are set to 95 BPM. So this is matching right across the board, and this is kind of bi-directional. Next up, we have the macro section. If you prefer to start your tuning by allowing the software to do something, then we can load one of the presets. So for example, we could choose a normal pitch range or a high pitch range or low pitch range, and then we could choose a snapping behavior. So we have different options over here. If you want it to automatically detect the scale and then snap, we can do that. Or if you've already input the scale, you can set it first and then you can have it snap. In addition to that, if you'd rather create your own preset to start off with, we have the macro settings. In this case, we can set anything that we want in terms of these different options, the snap settings, the drift, formant shifting, pitch range, and then we can just quite simply save a new preset, and then this will be available in user presets. Next up, let's head over to this section over here. If we click this little icon, you'll see that we have the ability to collapse, and we can click to hide. We have three different sections from within RePitch 2. We have pitch, we have level, and brand new to RePitch 2, we have the attack, which is the SmartAttack points that we have the ability to allow RePitch to quantize these to different settings. So for example, if we're in the attack settings and we're working with the lead vocal, we can have this set over here to be either bar beat, none, or we can use another track as a reference. And then this will kind of borrow those different settings. It's very, very useful. We're going to get into this a little bit further. And then of course we have our different options in terms of the mode. So let's leave ourselves in the pitch mode and let's take a look at some of these options over here. So we have undo, we have redo, and these of course will use the key commands, whether you're on a Mac or a PC. We then have an option for multi-region mode. What this is useful for is, right now I'm looking at a single contiguous region. But if you've done your comping and you've used different takes and you've kind of swiped these together and you have multiple different regions that are sitting beside each other, then you would definitely want to make sure that you are in the multi-region mode right over here, which will allow multiple regions to be selected and edited together. Let's just turn this off for now. Now, next up, we have this follow selection. So RePitch will update positioning to the clip that is selected from within the DAW. If you want the RePitch GUI to follow if you had individual different regions or different clips selected, then you could enable this. Typically speaking, I like to leave this off. Then we have the ability to turn this on or off, and this is bypass. We can use a shortcut. Notice that as I click the B key, that this kind of grays out. So we can think of this as either a bypass or an activate and deactivate. Now, next up, we have this cogwheel. We have the ability to manage our license, enter the settings, show the tooltips. I think these are useful to have on at the beginning, learn, help, and a version number. Now, I'm going to go into the settings very quickly, and we have some different options. So in terms of our display, we can display time, bars, beats, or samples. We have different options over here in terms of how we want our behavior to be. So for example, if you want to drag notes in semitone steps by default, we have the autosave location. We can have this set to a local folder, or we can save this from within the DAW session. And then we have the ability to manage our shortcuts. So things like this. Okay, next up, let's hide and collapse this. And I want to take a look at some of these other features. We're going to save this for the next step. These are the toolbars, but we have some options in terms of zooming. So I can zoom vertically or horizontally by just click holding and dragging. And then we can click hold this navigation area at the bottom, and we can click these drag handles out. If we want to kind of think of this as a macro view, but I wanted to focus on a very specific section of the song, I could, for example, just scroll over here. All right, so now let's talk about the ScreenLock option, which we have over here. But before we do that, I'm going to show you one tip. I'm going to jump ahead very quickly, and I'm going to show you one tooltip, which is incredibly useful. The default behavior of RePitch Standard is that the Option Command modifier, or Alt Control on a PC, this allows you to click, hold, and drag, and this is kind of like an adaptive vertical zooming. So as I click down, I'm zooming vertically, and as I click from left to right and I mouse drag, I'm either zooming in or out horizontally. So this is something that's very, very useful. And in addition to that, Shift Command or Shift Control on a PC will allow us to click, hold, and drag to reposition. So once you kind of master these two zooming behaviors, it's really easy to navigate using RePitch. Now, I mentioned that we're going to talk about this lock, the ScreenLock option. I'm going to temporarily deactivate this and take a look at what happens. I'm going to use the double click to play option that we have, which allows us to play from within the actual ARA editor.
Picture us rolling. Picture us on the PCH, on the way back from the beach to your crib. It's a good day. Guess I'm a little...
Okay, so we engaged playback from within the ARA editor, but notice that it kind of like goes back to where the DAW anchor point was with the cursor. If you want to have this kind of stay locked off and you want to find a zooming behavior that looks good where you can see everything, I typically tend to lock this off. And then if I engage playback, for example, even though we're locked to the DAW, I can engage playback from anywhere from within RePitch. So from here,
Picture us on the PCH, on the way back from the beach to your crib. It's a good day.
Now I'm going to push the space bar to stop. Notice that the cursor went back to where it's sitting in the DAW, which I think is a good thing. And we didn't lose any of our positioning here. So sometimes if you're working in a super zoomed in state, if your ScreenLock is disabled, then it might be jumping around a lot and you might lose your positioning. I tend to have this on by default, but this is a personal preference. You can use whatever you'd like. Okay, so we've covered all the main stuff here in the GUI, all these different sections. We're going to get into more detail with the attack and the level section, but the next thing I want to talk about is a toolbar. We can click, hold, and drag to reposition this anywhere on the screen we want. So if you want to be working in the lower section, maybe click, holding, and dragging to position it in the upper section would be good. We've got a lot of different tools here, so let's try to go through these. I'm going to be using the modifiers to click, hold, and drag and reposition, and my modifier for dynamically zooming. First of all, let's talk about the main selector tool. One thing I want to point out is there's two different potential behaviors that we have here. So we have the selector multi-edit mode and the selector single edit mode. So let's talk about what these are. So by default, when we click the Q key and when we see this arrow pointer tool, this is set to the multi-mode. And basically all that this means is that if you hover your cursor in the top half of the pitch block, notice that we have this up and down arrow. And if we hover our cursor in the bottom half, we have this left and right arrow. This means that we can adjust two different things. So for example, I could double click to snap this to a point, or I could click, hold, and drag to move this freely. Now, if I hover in the bottom, I have the ability to adjust the timing, and I can move this from left to right, or I can grab either one of these anchor points on the left and right boundaries of the pitch block, and I can adjust these. So let's make a highlighted selection. We'll right click and let's go to reset, and let's reset all changes here. That's a really quick and easy way to reset yourself if you've gone a little bit too far down the rabbit hole and you need to wind back your work. Now, the other mode that we have is the single edit mode. This is the mode that I prefer to use because what this basically does is makes it so that at any given point in time, we only have the ability to adjust the pitch and we're not accidentally adjusting the timing. One quick thing though, before we go, let me go back to the multi-edit mode, and I want to just talk about one way that I like to use this. I like to make a highlighted selection, and I like to hover my cursor in the bottom right. And now notice that I'm adjusting the timing and everything is relative to each other. And I could peel that back this way if I wanted to. Now, notice that as we do that, we have this yellow pitch trace indication, which is kind of glowing. This is basically kind of like a heat map that's indicating that there's a lot of processing going on in that particular section. So you might want to have a listen.
Tell me, lights.
Okay, now let's right-click again and let's reset all changes back over here. Next up, let's talk about the Center Notes tool. Let's head over to a different section over here, maybe this one right over here. I'm going to switch to the Center Notes tool. We have a key command, which is C, that we can use. And as I highlight across these blocks, notice what happens over here. We have this dialog window that pops up. And as I click and drag, notice that this is basically just doing exactly what it says on the tin. It is centering these off, and this will, of course, be based upon where the pitch trace is and nearest to the nearest chromatic semitone, or if you have a certain scale that you've selected over here and you have scale snapping, then this will snap those notes as well. Okay, next up, let's talk about Draw. Draw is a really unique tool that we have within RePitch, which basically allows you to do exactly what you would expect. If you're taking a look at this pitch trace here, and you would have preferred that the singer sang it like this, then you can basically just redraw anything. You could also just flatten something out completely if you wanted, but that's not necessarily something I would do. Let's undo this a couple times. Okay. Next up, let's talk about the Shaper tool. So this is something that is completely kind of like a new way of tuning and a new way of looking at tuning in general. And this is something that I've never seen in any other pitch editors. If we head over to this section over here, where I've already got some shape points that I've added, actually, let's just double click to get rid of these. And let's kind of start this from scratch. I'll double click these over here. And we'll talk about the basic foundation of using the Shaper tool. What this allows you to do is you can click at any point, and I can click and drag to the left or to the right if I want to adjust these. We can add a couple different shape points. So for example, let's add 3 shape points. Now watch what happens if I click, hold, and drag this. I can kind of increase or decrease the amplitude of this. Or if I hold down the Alter Option modifier, I'm just anchoring down the before and after points. So as opposed to using drift, this is a really good alternative. Now let's say we wanted to kind of even this out a little bit more. Maybe I could add another shape point here, another shape point here, and maybe we'll add one more to anchor this down. I could now click Alter Option modifier, and let's drag this one down a little bit. We can also click and we can swipe across multiple different shape points like this. And if I wanted to take all 3 of these with the Alter Option modifier, or all two of those rather, I can click, hold, and drag to reposition these. So we can manipulate the pitch trace and basically give ourselves whatever result that we were looking for. Now I'm going to head over to the Split tool. Now the Split tool is something that's pretty common for anybody who's worked with pitch correction, but if you haven't, if you have a certain section of your performance where you say to yourself, okay, well, I'm pretty sure that the intention was to have 2 different notes. This in its case is a swoop, so maybe we won't use that example. But let's find something else. We'll scroll over here. Maybe this one over here. If I wanted this to actually be separated into 2 different notes, then I could simply make a split over here, and then I could hop back to my main selector tool. And I want to actually use the single edit mode, which the key command shortcut for that is T. Then I could click, hold, and drag to reposition these. Now, the other thing worth mentioning is that we don't have to just use one tool. We can use a combination between a lot of different tools. So I could bring the Center Note tool open, and I could make a selection here. I could use that. I could also use the macro controls. So for example, let's go back to our main selector tool. We'll highlight this. I could adjust the drift here. I could adjust the amplitude here to kind of flatten this out. And then maybe I want to use the draw tool to kind of redraw what I think this transition should have been. Same thing over here. I want to kind of flatten this out. And for this section over here, maybe I want to use the shaper tool. So we'll select this. We can add a couple different shape points. And maybe I want to kind of adjust this and add some modulation or kind of amplify that. So there's a lot of different ways that we can work. Next up, let's take a look at the warp point adjustment tool. If you want to make adjustments to the timing, and you can drag any one of these handles from left to right, and you can see that this is kind of redrawing the timing and the groove of that. That being said, I typically find that any timing adjustments that I'm making, I would actually, let's just undo both of these moves. I would actually prefer to go into the multi-edit mode And let's go back to our main selector tool. And then I like to make a highlighted selection across multiple different pitch blocks. And I will grab the corner of one of the pitch blocks and I will make my timing adjustments like this, as opposed to going into the warp point tool or the warp tool. So if you want to kind of go under the hood and get into things, you can do that. But I find in general that when I'm making these timing adjustments, so for example, if I wanted to adjust the timing and feel of that I much prefer to do it with the main selector tool in the multi-edit mode. Last but not least, let's cover the magnifying tool. This one I never use. Its default behavior is click, hold, and drag. It's doing a dynamic zoom. And then if we use the shift and command modifier or shift control on a PC, we get the click, hold, and drag to reposition. But like I mentioned earlier in this video, regardless of which tool that we're using, this is the exact same behavior that we have with any tool. One thing I do want to make mention of is that if we take this audio event, I right click, I go into my event effects. This is how I do it in Studio One. In different DAWs, it may be instantiated a different way. Notice that we have now multiple different tracks that we can load. So this is our lead vocal 1, and this one over here is our lead vocal double. So we can go back and forth between the different audio clips or audio regions that we have loaded. I also mentioned that I'm working with the chromatic scale. We do have scale presets that we can choose. We can load them. We can save them. If I wanted to favorite anything, we can add a scale, anything like that we need. Next up, let's go into level. Level is its own view, which kind of breaks things up between the unpitched voicing, so things like breaths and consonants, and the actual melodic performance. So if we take a listen to this, we have some breaths over here, and we also have anything like a CH or an S. This will be separated. So we can select these and I can bring them up or down. Now, in addition to that, I can hold the Alter Option modifier and I can snap these in 3 dB increments. So let's take a look at this in a more practical sense. If we take a listen to this performance.
Round your neck, I got unlimited time on my...
Okay, this one over here, the level's a little bit high. Click, hold, and drag. Take a moment and you'll see that that is updated. Now also for these breaths, Alter Option modifier, and I can bring down the breaths. So for anybody who likes to do any manual editing where they like to use clip gain and redraw the actual volume curves, and that is just based on the actual size of the waveforms. Really quick and easy way that we can do this is just by bringing this down. Now you do have to be careful with this and you want to make sure that you audition your work, but this is something that we can do from within the level view. Also worth mentioning though, that if you're in the main pitch view, and let's zoom into a specific section over here, we can also do something similar because we have the macro controls as we hover over any pitch block. And if we highlight this one pitch block over here, I can increase the level either up or down as needed. Last up, we're going to talk about the new attack mode. So this is something that was added in RePitch 2. And what this allows you to do is make some decisions in terms of some basic quantization that we can apply. So for this example, let's play from here.
Picture us on the PCH, on the way back from the beach to your crib.
Okay, I think this is a really good phrase. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in to this one section. And the idea here is we want to be in the attack section. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a highlighted selection just across these attack points, which have been automatically calculated by RePitch. Now what I'm going to do is in terms of the grid mode, I'm going to go to bar and beat. And this will give me now kind of like a clear boundary in terms of what we're doing. The mode, we're going to stick with vocal. And what I can do is I have the option to align all attacks to the grid or align the selection to the grid. This is the way I really like to use this because let's take a listen to this.
Picture us on the PCH.
I'm using a double click to engage playback from within the array playback. Now I'm going to align selection to grid. And now let's take a listen to that same section.
Picture us on the PCH, on the way back from the...
So that's a big difference that we have, right? So first of all, let's deactivate, listen to the original.
Picture us on the PCH, on the way back from the beach.
And now let's listen to the new alignment that we've created.
Picture us on the PCH, on the way back from the beach.
So this is really useful in a lot of different contexts. First of all, if you have a performance that's maybe a little bit off time and you want to kind of bring this into quantize it according to the grid in terms of bars and beats, it can be useful. You can also make these adjustments manually, but I really like using the align selection to grid mode. Also, something else that we have is we have the ability to set a reference. So instead of the grid being bar and beat, we have the ability to make the grid be an actual other track. What this can be useful for is kind of borrowing timing from another one and having that be an alignment reference point that we can be used. Now, there's going to be specific videos covering this in detail. So here's what I'll say in terms of signing off. If you're looking for very specific information on any of these features in detail, you're definitely going to want to check out the YouTube channel and find the video that suits what you're trying to do. But hopefully in this video, you can see that we have all of these different features and that this will be a really good stop in terms of getting you the information you need in terms of working with RePitch 2. I'm Marcus Huyskens, and we'll catch you in the next video. Cheers.